This final lesson is just to summarize some of the properties of the elements on the periodic table. A lot of this material you may not see on the AP exam, but it is helpful to be able to know some of these things, to have a bigger picture idea of how the periodic table is put together. The periodic table is organized primarily into two sections, the metals and the nonmetals. Most elements, about 80% of the elements on the periodic table, are metals, and then the rest are nonmetals in the top right corner. The elements that sit within this staircase are called metalloids or semimetals. Typically, elements become more metallic as you approach francium on the periodic table. Metallic elements have very low ionization energies, which mean they lose their electrons very easily. It takes very little energy to remove electrons, whereas electrons take a lot more energy to be removed from elements that are in the top right corner. You should know the general properties of metals versus nonmetals, right? We say that metals are shiny, they have a luster, they're malleable, they're ductile, good conductors of heat and electricity, and that's pretty much it. And then nonmetals have properties that are the opposites of that. You should know the pattern by which elements tend to form ions. So you should know that everything in group 1 tends to form a positive 1 charge. Everything in group 2 tends to form a positive 2 charge. There's there are 3 elements in the transition metals that always form a consistent charge: zinc 2+, silver 1+, and cadmium 2+. The other elements that are transition metals can typically form multiple charges, and the reason why that is because those d electrons can influence the properties of those ions and how they're formed. Aluminum is a 3+, and then starting with the nitrogen group, everything that's a nonmetal is a 3-. The oxygen group is a 2-, and then hydrogen sometimes can form a -1 charge as a -1 ion, and fluorine and the rest of the halogens form a -1 charge. You should know the general properties of metals. You should know that metal oxides tend to form bases. We'll come back to that when we learn more about acids and bases. You should know that nonmetals have properties that are the opposite of metals. They're brittle, they're poor conductors of electricity. Nonmetal oxides tend to form acids, and again, we'll review that when we go to acids and bases later in the year. Things that are semimetals or metalloids have properties that are kind of in between metals and nonmetals, like silicon and germanium. The alkali metals have a very low first ionization energy. They react with water to generate hydrogen gas. They produce very colorful flames in the flame test. Alkaline earth metals are slightly reactive with water. The reactivity goes down within the group. Your more reactive alkaline earth metals are near the top. The calcagens, we often don't really talk about this family as a group, but oxygen, sulfur, and selenium are referred to as the calcagens. Tellurium is a metalloid, and polonium is a radioactive metal. Sulfur is a unique substance in that it has the ability to form an allotrope as a ring of sulfur atoms, sulfur 8. It also forms bonds with itself in rubber and hair. But again, that's a topic that we'll come back to when we learn about polymers. The halogens in group 17 are -1 anions. They're very reactive compared to the other nonmetals. And your noble gases are typically very stable and very non-reactive because they have a filled outer shell of electrons. And typically, most of them exist as a monatomic or one-atom gas. So we're going to spend the rest of class reviewing for your test, but that should take us through the entirety of Unit 1.